Hey everyone, I hope you're having a good day today, wherever you are. Today I wanted to talk about a time in my life where I felt lost. Now I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that feeling. Not really knowing where you're headed, not really living with a purpose, feeling stuck, and just not really moving forward in life. And honestly, I'm sure a lot of you experienced similar feelings around the time I was going through this, during the 2020 pandemic. Specifically, I want to talk about what my life looked like during that time, and how getting good at video games, Smash Bros. Ultimate to be exact, genuinely helped pull me out of this daily routine of stagnation and just getting by. It might sound kinda silly to act like a video game changed my life, but getting good at this game genuinely helped push me forward, and helped me break out of a terrible cycle during one of the most difficult periods of my life. You see, the pandemic began when I was a sophomore in college. After a year and a half of living on campus and getting used to dorm life, I was abruptly ripped out of my new environment, and I went back to living in my childhood home with my parents. At first, moving home was a breath of fresh air, a blanket of comfort with all of the uncertainty and scariness happening to the world at the time. It felt safe and familiar, especially considering the fact that I'm an introvert, and considering it meant I didn't need to live with a roommate anymore. Moving back with my parents during the pandemic, it felt like my life got easier in a lot of ways. I didn't have to go to class anymore, other than Zoom class, which was basically a complete joke. I would honestly just go on Reddit during class, or turn a YouTube video or Twitch stream on in the background to give myself some extra stimulation while I was in class. It was kind of like my own version of those Subway Surfer videos on TikTok. It's safe to say that almost no learning was happening during those classes. But anyways, I wasn't working very much at my part-time job either at the time, and even when I was, it would be from the comfort of my own bedroom. I worked from home, went to school from home, invited friends over to my home if I ever wanted to see them. Despite hanging out with them occasionally, I really kept to myself for the most part. It was an introvert's dream. It was at this point in my life that it felt like everything became easy for me. I didn't have to wake up early and leave the house to go to classes, which, by the way, were easier than ever during COVID. I didn't need to navigate the stressful social situations of college, and I didn't really have any other commitments or responsibilities at all. When I got bored or lonely every week or two, I could invite a friend to come hang out in my parents' house, where I was very comfortable and at home. This was great for a while. At the time, I just figured that the point of being in college was to make sure I did well in classes. So as long as I was keeping my grades up, I was doing great, right? As long as I was building up some savings living with my parents and getting a degree, what else did I need to be doing? Sure, life felt like I was taking the easy road, but what's so bad about the easy road after all? Especially when the pandemic basically forced me onto it. As we got deeper and deeper into the pandemic, the easy road started to have some negative effects on me. Because I didn't have very many responsibilities, I started staying up later, playing video games, watching YouTube, and usually smoking weed while doing all three of those. It got worse and worse until I would often stay up until 6 or 7 in the morning, and then sleep in until 3 p.m. or so. My sleep schedule was in complete shreds, and the constant inconsistency made me feel tired and unmotivated all the time. I would often wake up feeling groggy, taking a few hours just to reorient myself to being awake, then finally start feeling fully awake at 6 or 7 p.m. But by then, it felt like I'd already wasted the entire day. To make up for it, I'd stay up late doing something I enjoyed, watching YouTube, playing games, or smoking weed, just to feel like I got some enjoyment out of the day. Of course, that usually meant staying up way too late again, and the same cycle would repeat itself the next day. I started to feel more and more miserable as the weeks went on. It slowly started to gnaw at me that I barely exercised, I rarely left the house, I had no romantic prospects at all. I was probably nursing a minor but growing dependence on weed, and I never really challenged myself to do anything other than pass my classes. I was in a self-made bubble of isolation, doing what was convenient and easy while avoiding any sort of discomfort. And to make things worse, doing uncomfortable things seemed more difficult than ever, because I hadn't pushed myself to do any in so long. At this point, I started experiencing more anxiety than I ever had before. I felt like a failure in a lot of ways. Sure, I was getting decent grades, but college was supposed to be about making friends, going to wild parties, and making memories that you can look back on for the rest of your life. Well, I had a few solid friends, and I made some good memories with them. It felt like I wasn't doing college right. I felt like my family was judging me for never leaving the house, never exercising, and for never hanging out with girls or getting a girlfriend. I felt like the failure of the family. While I would sometimes try to make some minor changes to make my life slightly less miserable, like exercising more often and making more of an effort to meet up with my friends, things stayed largely the same for the entirety of my junior year of college and through the summer before senior year. When my senior year finally came, the pandemic was winding down, and my school decided to transition back to in-person classes. As the first semester started, I ended up moving into an apartment right by campus with a friend I'd made during freshman year. Even though I wasn't living alone, it often felt that way, because my roommate mostly kept to himself, playing games, watching anime, or just sleeping the day away in his room. While it was good to at least have another person around, in a strange way, he was probably the worst kind of roommate for me to have at this point in my life, because it basically allowed me to live alone without actually living alone, if that makes any sense. It felt like now that my parents weren't around to judge me, I no longer had absolutely any reason to stay on a normal sleep schedule, or to appear like I was a functioning adult. And, to be clear, I don't know if my parents actually did judge me when I lived with them, or if it just felt like they did because I was so anxious all the time. But either way, now that I wasn't living with them, it just felt like I didn't have to keep up appearances anymore. And honestly, that brought out the worst in me. It was around this time that my friend, let's call him Z, came to visit. Now, Z and I had become friends and started hanging out in high school, but Z had moved away around the beginning of college, so I wasn't able to hang out with him except for when he would come back home every once in a while to visit. When we were in high school, Z and I bonded over anime, but even more so, we loved playing Smash Ultimate whenever we hung out. So when Z came over to my apartment, we naturally started playing Smash like usual. We were having a good time, and I was remembering what I liked about Smash, but also what I enjoyed about hanging out with Z. This was when Z mentioned that he'd like to play Smash online sometimes, and he recommended I give it a shot. This sounded like a great idea, as when Z ended his trip and went back across the country, he and I would still be able to call each other on Discord or whatever, and play Smash like we usually would. After Z left, we agreed to give it a shot and play online together. Sure enough, a week or so later, we did just that, and it was really fun. At this point, Z and I got in the habit of playing Smash together every few days, and it really became part of my routine. Despite having grown up on Smash Melee and playing the Smash games throughout my childhood, I hadn't ever been this into Smash before, and I had never been this good at the game either. As we played, Z would explain more mechanics to me that I hadn't known about before, like teching, get-up attacks, directional rolls, and ledge options. It became clear to me that in order to get better at Smash, it wouldn't just be important to utilize these mechanics, but also to use mix-ups, meaning it's important to mix up which options you use in order to avoid becoming predictable, or even to bait your opponent into a specific option. I could feel myself getting better at the game the more we played, and as I got better, I found myself gravitating towards a few characters that I really liked. In particular, I found myself drawn to Byleth, and I could tell they were my best character by far. One day when Z and I were playing online, he asked if it was cool if his friends, let's call them K and J, could join us. As I was still pretty used to minimal social contact and avoiding any discomfort that I could, my gut reaction was that I didn't want anybody that I didn't know to play with us. But nevertheless, I didn't want to be rude, and I agreed to have us all play together for a bit. They joined our Discord call, and we introduced ourselves as we played each other. It became clear that K and J were a lot better at the game than Z and I. We would always play against each other using tournament rules, which meant we played 1v1 with 3 stocks and no items, and only on a few select maps. K and J were so good at the game that I could usually only take 1 stock off them before they took all 3 of my stocks. While it was initially frustrating to get my butt kicked so badly, something weird started to happen. I started to enjoy losing, not because I didn't want to win, but because it gave me a goal to strive towards. I knew that going into playing with K and J, I wasn't even close to beating them. But that just meant that if I could get good enough to beat them, I would know for sure that I had significantly improved at the game. So I decided I needed to start grinding. I upped my playtime, playing with K and J more, but also playing random opponents online pretty much every day. I started looking at YouTube guides for how to play Byleth. I learned what her strengths and weaknesses are, what moves are optimal and what moves are pretty much useless, and I learned all of her bread and butter combos that let me maximize damage every time I'm in an advantageous position. I was really learning at a rapid pace. At this point, I became obsessed with Smash Ultimate. I would often play anywhere between 2 to 6 hours a day. Eventually, I found myself getting into Elite Smash, which is the top 20% of online players. At this point, playing with K and J was still challenging, but they weren't completely demolishing me anymore. In fact, I was even able to beat them sometimes. The amount of pride I felt beating K and J was incredible. It served as an objective measure of how far I'd come in getting better at the game, and that's when I started to have a realization. Sometimes taking the easy route isn't actually the best option. Sure, beating someone who's worse than you at Smash can feel great at first. You can rack up wins, pull off flashy plays, spike the ever-living crap out of them, and walk away feeling pretty confident. But the thing with playing a weaker opponent is that it never challenges you to improve. They don't force you to adapt, try new strategies, or fix the mistakes in your gameplay. And without that challenge, it's hard to get much better. This wasn't just about Smash Bros. Anymore. There was a significant shift happening inside me, and my way of viewing the world was changing. I was starting to truly enjoy my life more. I had finally found something I was passionate about, something I genuinely enjoyed that I could continually improve at. Rather than avoiding challenges that seemed too difficult, I started taking them head on and persevering until they forced me to improve. For the first time in a long time, being challenged felt exciting rather than scary. At this point, I was so into Smash that I got into watching tournaments online, and even attending a few local tournaments myself. I was only ever able to beat one person at a tournament, as it turns out the people at Smash tournaments are on another level. But the fact that I would usually lose didn't really bother me. After all, it just meant I had even more opponents to challenge, and ultimately learn from. And at this point, I was beating K and J so badly that they would rage quit a lot of the times we would play. The roles had been completely reversed, and I could tell I was a lot better at the game than I had been before. Hanging out with K and J, as well as meeting people at Smash tournaments, I went from having one friend that I hang out with to 4 or 5 friends, and regularly attended Smash tournaments and hangouts. Even if it was scary sometimes, I was more outgoing than I had been in years. I even challenged myself to try other hobbies and improve at them as well. For example, I got into really good shape because I was rock climbing so much. When I would rock climb, I would continually try to challenge myself, just like with Smash. Each week I would try to climb a harder grade, and I went from having no endurance and barely being able to make it up a wall, to being a pretty respectable climber. All of this newfound confidence I gained from constantly challenging myself eventually pushed me to do something I'd been afraid to do for years. Put myself out there and try dating apps. While it was pretty uncomfortable for me to post pictures of myself for strangers on the internet to judge, I did it anyway, trying to focus on how I could possibly meet someone really special. Sure enough, I met a girl on there pretty quickly. After messaging back and forth for a while, we decided to meet up in person. Honestly, I was completely terrified to meet a stranger I'd met online. I was sweating bullets, and it felt like my heart was going a million miles an hour when I stepped out of my car to meet her for the first time. But it turned out to be one of the best decisions I've ever made. That girl I went on a first date with has been my girlfriend now for almost 4 years. It's now about 5 years later, and while I still play Smash with Z every week or two, my addiction has definitely gone away a bit. But what hasn't gone away is my attitude towards life. Of course, I still get scared sometimes. I mean, I'm human after all. But I no longer hold the belief that the easiest life means the best life. Like it or not, life comes with challenges. We can't control what obstacles get thrown at us, but we can control how we approach them. We can run from adversity, or we can face it head on and use it as an opportunity to grow. If you take one thing away from this video, I hope it's that you should never be afraid to do something that scares you, and never be afraid of failure. If you can even do one small thing that pulls you out of your comfort zone, it might have a bigger impact on your life than you think. If you take a risk and it pays off, then great, mission accomplished. But even if it doesn't, the experience wasn't for nothing. You can learn from that failure, grow from it, and maybe even more importantly, you'll be less afraid to take a risk next time. Once you realize that failing isn't the end of the world, taking the next risk feels a whole lot easier. I want to give a huge thank you to everyone who has watched this video until the end. Despite my new job ramping up in hours, I want to continue to make videos like these when I have time. Making these 2 videos has been very therapeutic for me, and I hope they can be peaceful, relaxing, or interesting for you guys watching. I hope you all are having a good day, and I'll talk to you soon.